Thank you so much for that conversation, Christian and Dan. We have a lot of questions and reflections, I think, to make. We will now move into session 2 of the workshop, titled Evolution of Urban Design Over the Last 4 Decades. The Veronica Rudge Green Prize stands as a testament to how urban design continually redefines itself, from shaping physical form to shaping systems and the very ways in which we inhabit the planet. It reminds us that design excellence today is not only an aesthetic pursuit, but also an act of responsibility, one capable of transforming not just cities, but the social and ecological systems that also sustain them. In this session, we will hear from Professor Peter Rowe, one of the founding architects of the Green Prize when it was founded almost 4 decades ago. He will trace the evolution of the award and reflect on how the projects recognized over the decades reveal the changing ambitions, scales, and methods of the field of urban design. Professor Peter Rowe is the Raymond Karp Professor of Architecture and Urban Design and a Harvard University Distinguished Service Professor. He served as Dean of the Graduate School of Design from 1992 to 2004, as the Chair of Department of Urban Planning and Design from 1988 to 92, and as the Director of the Urban Design Program from 1985 to 1990. Before joining Harvard, he was Director at the School of Architecture at Rice University and led numerous multidisciplinary research initiatives. And please join me in welcoming Professor Peter Rowe.
I think I need my glasses. Thank you very much. How do I move this forward? Press the...
You just have to click the green.
The green, okay, all right. By way of something of a recap, the prize was established in 1986 on the occasion of the Harvard 350th anniversary and the 50th anniversary of the GSD, that is to say the Graduate School of Design. And here you can see Charles III now, when he was Prince of Wales, speaking at the sort of university ceremony. He's wearing his Cambridge robes, I believe. Here are some images of the anniversary celebration at the Graduate School of Design. You can see Dean McHugh and Derek Bock, the president, cutting a cake, and people nattering at Charles, etc. Endowment of the prize was made by Michael von Clem, whom I'm showing you here, a longtime friend of the school. And under the aegis of Dean McHugh, he and I more or less invented the rules for this prize. And these embrace roughly 6 stipulations. It's for a built project anywhere in the world larger than a single building or landscape intervention. It's a project constructed within the last 10 years or so. It's a project that made a positive and substantial contribution to the public realm of a place and improved the quality of life in that place. And a project that demonstrated a humane and worthwhile contribution to urban design per se. And it was to be awarded by a jury comprised of members of the GSD faculty, with 1 outsider per jury, at least. Endowment was to cover the costs of the award in terms of jury travel, exhibition, publication, plus a cash award for the award recipients. Originally, the award was called the Prince of Wales Prize in Urban Design, which was changed after the 3rd award in 1993 by mutual disagreement, shall we say, between ourselves and the Prince, to become the Veronica Rudge Green Prize in urban design, named after Michael's von Clem's mother, with her own considerable distinction. By the way, Michael I got to know quite well. He was a brilliant scholar, quite apart from being a businessman. And he, in fact, did his, I'm sure he loved this award, actually, because he did his dissertation at Oxford University on a Bento tribe in Africa, in Tanzania, I believe, and he actually spoke fluent Swahili. So he would have been, I think, quite comfortable with the prize going to the way it has today, actually. Since the first award in 1988, there have been 15 awards, beginning with the biker housing project in Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK by Ralph Erskine, and the Malagueira project in Évora, Portugal by Álvaro César. The biker was very much about user participation and process, and actually the reorganisation of the Geordie into their particular districts, whereas the Malagueira was very much more about the formal and place-making specifics of Álvaro César's architecture. The 1990 second award was made for the urban public spaces of Barcelona in Spain, of which there were more than about 100 actually at the time in which we made the award. They ranged from the Mol de la Fusta, which you can sort of see on the, let me see, the Mol de la Fusta on the far side by Manuel de Sola Morales, across the harbour front of the entire city, and also the Plaza Juris of Gracias, a very sort of distinguished kind of southern Mediterranean way of building public open space. Incidentally, Manuel de Sola was among the, I'm not sure if it was the first class of urban designers, but certainly one of the very early classes of urban designers in the 1960s. He was a graduate of that program. The 1993 award went to Hillside Terrace in Tokyo by Fumihiko Maki, another graduate of our program, and to the public building of Monte Carrasso in Swiss the Ticini by Luigi Schnozzi. They were both rather more, we might call them puntal interventions than massive urban design projects. And indeed, Alex Krieger, who chaired this jury, was sort of very interested in that aspect of urban design as a sort of process of making a place with a relatively small building scale impact. The 1996 award went to Mexico City with two projects, one concerned with the rehabilitation of the older central city area, and the other with the ecological restoration of Xochimilco Park. The central city was a joint effort directly under the government of, whereas Xochimilco was largely the project of Mario Shetman, a distinguished landscape architect from California, actually. The 1958 award went to the Bilbao Metro and the Sans Dart in Nîmes by Lord Foster. As much as anything, it was a celebration of a prominent architect as an urbanist and dealt with the edge, so to speak, between architecture and urban design. And the jury, as you can see, was chaired by Rodolfo Machado. The 2000, the sixth award, was given to the Favela Barrio project in Rio de Janeiro, and it featured non-residential community and oriented improvements within the informal sector of the favela settlements of Rio that you can sort of see here. The 2002 or seventh award went to the Borneo Sporenburg residential waterfront project in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. That's by Adrien Geuze and West 8. And this was a rehabilitation of unused wharves and into quality housing and mixed-use developments, even though Rodolfo actually fell off the boat into the water. The 2005 award went to the rehabilitation. I'm getting ahead of myself here. The 2005 eighth award went to the rehabilitation of the city of. Wait a minute, what am I doing? Here we go. Aleppo in Syria. This was a project by the GTZ, or GIZ now, the German Society for the International Cooperation, a prominent NGO in the German context. The 2007 award went to the Olympic Sculpture Park in Seattle by Weiss Manfredi. He was here somewhere. This man Freddie was, I think. He's giving desk to it. Oh, good, he's working. I'm glad to hear that. I usually work with him, actually, to be honest. This was the first American recipient of the award, so to speak, largely in the manner of dealing with a very difficult topographic and public programmatic condition, but also in an extremely sort of skillful and rather beautiful way. The 2010, or the 10th award, went to the Chongkichong Stream Restoration Project in South Korea, and it celebrated very much the recovery of a stream underlying the city from actually a completely failed roadway project at 2 levels that became, in the end, the city's primary public open space. Indeed, Min Kyung Kim worked on this project as the landscape architect, and she was a graduate of our landscape program here. The 2013th, or the 11th award, went to the Metro de Porto in Portugal and the Northeastern Integration Project in Medellin in Colombia by Soto de Moro and Alejandro Equia, respectively. And this award was for 2 rather different ways of dealing with public mobility infrastructure, as you can see here, but in very compelling manners. The 2015th or 12th award went to the Madrid-Rio project in Madrid, Spain by Ginés Gerardo and Associates. He also taught here at the school for some time. The project essentially buried the M30 highway running parallel to the Manzanares River that you can sort of see here in these illustrations, and allowing for a more complete integration of both sides, shall we say, parallel to the Manzanares River. The 2017th or the 13th award was made to the Highline project in Manhattan, New York, mainly by James Corner and Field Operations, and the second recipient of an American project of the award. The project also celebrated the Friends of the Highline, an organisation that took the rehabilitation of a disused railway line running through the city on the west side into consideration. One of these mobility projects again, you might say infrastructure project again. The 2013 or 14th award went to the Grand Paris Express by the Société de Grand Paris, which effectively links outlying areas of Paris, France, together in the manner envisaged by President Sarkozy, unfortunately now in jail, I believe. One of the prominent aspects of the project was 60 or more of these metro stations that are being constructed as we speak. And then today's 2025 or 15th award is being made, of course, to the Rwanda Institute for Conservation Agriculture campus by Mass Group in Africa. And this represents, I think, another departure of the award in the direction of, I would call them desiccators, actually, and prominently found in many parts of the developing world. Now, among key aspects of these awards, at least for me, 6 of them stand out. And the first of them is sort of an eclecticism of awards, if you like, ranging through housing provision, public open space provision, puntal or large-scale urban design operations, informal versus formal arrangements, historic conservation, infrastructure as public space, and so I can go on. What this, of course, does illustrate is the multiple aspects, actually, of urban design and perhaps even the expansiveness of that over time. The second aspect of is the number of shared projects, rightly expressing, I think, a reckoning that there can be usually more than one way of solving a particular problem. And that if we couldn't reach a decision between them, we would celebrate both, or at least 3 if necessary. A third aspect was social content of the awards, reflecting, I think, an aspect of the GSD, and in other words, it places a great deal of value into the sort of social content or almost the morality, you might say, of the projects, historically as well as now. The fourth aspect is a reception of the award itself, in which there were sort of two aspects to this. First of all, drawing attention within the school to prominent urban design projects, and secondly, allowing the school to actually stand for something in the outside world regarding what they consider to be good urban design. The fifth aspect was, of course, the influence of the jury on the awards, again reflecting the heterogeneity involved in urban design practice and the fact that we all have our own sorts of opinions about these things, as the students in this room no doubtly know and recognise. I'm always right, of course. Finally, the fifth has got to do with the manner we started and also the manner where we are now, I think, as a sort of parallel discussion. In the first award, which I chaired the jury for, Ada Louise Huxtable and Raphael Moneo and I myself went through long discussions as to what we ought to focus on. In other words, how do you start this program from going forward? And we decided that housing was the appropriate thing to do, because about 40% of everything that's made within an urban design context, actually including this one we're awarding today, is about made up of housing. So why not, we'll deal with housing. And so we did, and we selected the Biker Wall project and the Evora project of Caesar. And also, when we come to today's award, it's made obviously for sustainability and the fact that we all, I think, in this building recognise the fact that we're living in the Anthropocene era, and that in fact, if we don't begin to solve some of the suitability and sustainability problems, we're all going to be sunk, so to speak. So I think where we started and where we are now are very much part of the sort of time in which we found ourselves in. Now, something we've been doing recently, or have done recently, is to create a database of urban design projects for general use in the school, of which these include the 19 projects that have received the award, but we've also added to it. I've worked on this project with Rahul Mehrotra, my colleague over there, and Wojciech next to him from the library, and technical staff, in order to develop this particular database. As you can see from the sort of home page introduction, you can navigate yourself more or less intuitively through this, we hope anyway, for instance, by calling up a project by name, location, type, or authorship. And we can also get at various kinds of information. This gives you a snippet of that from the Biker redevelopment project, where you can get plans, which we own because we drew them, so to speak, and photographs, which we also own. So a lot of the clearing process for copyright and so forth like that has to be undertaken in this database. And we've expanded it beyond to include these 40 or so projects, and we're going to unveil this as a utility within the school, shall we say, and as a sort of public contribution to the study of urban design under the name Urban Design Project Network during the course of this cycle. Thank you. Do I sit? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Peter. I would like to invite Christiane and Dan to join Peter and follow us into a conversation and debate.
Oh, there's Manfredi.
So I think I'd like to start off this discussion with reflecting on what Peter's just been talking about. We've seen the breadth of the projects that have been awarded. They vary in scale, context, and domain. So how, in your perspective, do you think we're witnessing a shift in what the discipline of urban design even means? Are we seeing a shift from it being primarily form-based to a more systems-thinking approach that it's taking? And now with the introduction of RICA into the whole portfolio, where do you see the dimension of productivity sort of adding to the future of urban design?
You want me to comment? Okay. Well, it goes up and down, as I tried to suggest. I mean, it's very eclectic in that way. Although, in fact, if one wants to sort of think about it more, you might say ontologically in terms of categories, we have moved through several. I mean, there are a lot of these projects have been awarded to projects that are infrastructural, I would say. They have to do with the underpinning of something. Housing, we've given it to, 2 projects probably. Maybe overdone it a little bit in some ways. But now, it's reflecting, I think, where the school is. This school is very concerned at the moment, at least in urban design, on sustainability, on exactly, how do you define the right question to be solving in an urban design project, to go back to this gentleman on my left's prognosis of what they were doing in RICA, which I think is the right way to go. And that, and also the question of social justice and so forth are primary concerns of students and of the school in general. So it waxes and wanes, and I think that will continue, and it will continue productively. And if anything, over time, it's cumulative. So, it gets a bit bigger, and a bit bigger as it moves along. But I think we're in a reasonable place at the moment, ergo the award to RICA for their work, which is quite complicated. It has a lot to do with questioning the definition of what is a design problem and how do you actually define that. It's got to do with design thinking as much as it has to do with urban design as such. And I think at the end of the day, urban design is simply that. It's a form of design thinking and not necessarily a separate discipline at all.
Right. If you were to add to this dimension of productivity that you were talking about, how essential do you think that is to how we look at urban design now? Is it more regenerative in the way we're looking at retrofitting existing systems or building?
Well, I think we have to retrofit existing systems, or else we're dead in the water. I mean, I do a lot of my research, as you very well know, over there in the funny house, the Centre for Green Buildings and Cities. And what we're trying to do is to figure out how do you rewrite urban design into terms that are metabolically identifiable and can be quantified and can be talked about in that sort of a way. And that, I think, is the right way forward, frankly. There are systematic ways in which we can approach these problems.
And Christian, I think
and by the way, I don't think productivity is necessarily on my mind. I don't care if it's productive or not. I just want it to work and not put me in and put me underground in 20 years.
One thing, when, by the way, a very nice kind of a presentation, which struck me in the presentation was the question of quality. We use immense resources by building. And, 40% of the total global emissions is from the built environment. So I think going through this, I think it's also a lot about when we build, do we actually create an impact or do we create quality? And I think in many different ways, many of these different award-winning projects are also the question about when we do something, we also create quality. And in different ways, and I think that's really, really important that we are advocates. That when we do something, we need to ensure that we create a qualitatively impact. Otherwise, we shouldn't build anymore. Yeah. At least I'm starting to be fronted by this kind of building stop movements, saying we shouldn't build at all, or if you build, you really need to argue why. And I think the question of quality when you go through these projects is very, very important to kind of focus on.
I agree. I like beauty, frankly. So do you, Dan. I've seen your work. It's very beautiful. I just don't sort of see these as being mutable at all. I mean, I think our responsibility as designers and as good designers is to always produce beauty out of something, right? And even if it's a reuse of a building in a certain sort of way, like, for example, what you've done in the Nordhaven in Copenhagen, for example, is beautiful. But it's working with reuse. It's working along the lines of sustainability and all of that. And I think, don't see these as being mutually exclusive at all. In fact, you know, they have to be inclusive. You know, you don't get a passing grade in the school without something being beautiful.
But it's also with the RICA project. I think it's really beautiful, and it's really kind of, it has an aesthetic to it, which I think is really important to speak about also. Architectural quality in different scales.
Yeah, beauty is very important. Actually, like I would say, as we call it a right, therefore, we shouldn't even be discussing whether things should have to be beautiful. I think we should always strive to create beauty. But there is something that we should always, I think about and question, because in our fields, there's a lag between how our solutions are initiated, how they become improved, to when generation and lifestyles and our life change. So, for instance, one problem that is very apparent in many African cities is that the definition of urban living is very disconnected from the solutions you're proposing in urban designs and architecture and design. Because now, because of all host of reasons, most of them driven by how technology have changed our lives and relationship to each other and our aspiration and everything else, the new generations that are urbanites in Africa, their lives are very disconnected from some of the basic principles of urban living, which urban design responds to, even architecture responds to. So, because of that, there's I think a reconciliation that has to happen about knowledge creation and the time it takes to respond to some of these challenges. If you think about a project of architecture like RICA, I mean, we did it, took us 5 years because we are in Rwanda. And things get to have a certain level of efficiency. If we were in another African country, it could have taken us 20 years. Would it have been solving the same problems I was trying to solve at that time, versus what it is now? So I think it's also in Professor Rowe's presentation, it's interesting to see like the evolution, and he was very eloquent in talking about why they're considering those projects at that time, what they were responding to, and everything else, which I think in the field of design, especially in architecture, because I'm an architect, the time it takes us to conceive a project, think about it, now, like life changes, I don't know, maybe faster than before. I don't think I know enough, to make a comparison. But if a project takes 10, 15, 20 years to complete, and then like the purpose for which it was established might have changed. And I don't know what we do to bridge that gap, that disconnect that is happening. And when you put it on a massive scale for what I presented about here today, where we talk about millions and millions of square meters that needs to be built, and the time it will take to establish all of that, and then the life has changed. People no longer want to have, open concept kitchens in their flats because it's no longer fashionable, and then, all our building stocks have like open, concept kitchens. Then what? Then we just retrofit everything, and then again, and like it becomes like this aspiration that fuels that extractive process that we're all claiming we want to get away of. And then it becomes like just this cycle that it's very difficult to break away from.
I wasn't a member of the jury for this at all, so I can sort of say anything I like about your project. And I will. Say anything anyway.
Thank you.
No, but I mean, it struck me in looking at this project, and particularly going through the exhibition and speaking with various people, etc., and knowing a little bit about Africa, but not a lot. it is in fact a beautiful celebration of a lot of this idea of sustainability and redefinition of problems in ways that are meaningful as an outcome. You know, I think you've built it right, so to speak, right? And we can point at that, and it's not going to go away in 10 years. And whether the lifestyle changes, this, that, and the other thing, and I need a refrigerant or something or other in my kitchen, tough, you know. I think there's a large enough mark left by that project that suggests there's another way of viewing the world, which takes into consideration sustainability, takes into consideration who's being displaced, takes into consideration the social dimensions of the project, that make it beautiful. Yes. Because how do we understand beauty otherwise? Is it sort of ontologically neutral? That's nonsense. We all know what a babe looks like. Shush.
So maybe this is a good point also to address the rural, urban, and the peri-urban continuum that you were mentioning in your presentation. And we've seen that most of the past awards have largely focused on dense urban settings. So how or what do you think the future of resilient urbanism actually looks like? Do you think that the logic is actually rural? And do we actually see a shift of urban design principles moving?
No, I don't think it's an urban-rural thing. I mean, why I use the term desa kota, which is actually is an Indonesian term. Desa meaning town, kota meaning city, right? Desa kota, is because it refers to a typology of development which is rural, industrial, and urban at the same time. And it exists all over Southeast Asia, all over East Asia, and all over, well, more than half the world, quite frankly, as a typology, desa kota, right? And it's quite well known, I think, to most of us. And, you know, it's a very, very good project. And that is a territory we need to claim. Urban design, to me, is a way of thinking about the world. It's not sort of married to inner city, metropolitan, and all of these other big words at all. It's got to do with how we think about the interaction of all of these things that we want to incorporate into the world. And so these desa kotas are vast, believe me. I'm from Southeast Asia, you know. I talk funny because I'm from two little islands in the Pacific, you know, floating around in boats. So it's, you know, for us, desa kota is a big deal. It's a vast area of the world. And we need to understand it and we need to work with it. But look, 30% of the Chinese GDP about 20 years ago was defined by what happened in desa kotas. They call them township village enterprises. The Chinese are that way, okay? So it's a typology, it's a place-specific typology that we need to work with. And we do. These guys do. This one here, terrific. Wonderful, actually, beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I'm going to add another one. There are thousands of communities that are nomad populations in Northern Africa that are not tied to land. So issues of, you know, urban centers or rural areas doesn't mean anything to them. Like they just live a very different lifestyle. There are communities that are water-based communities, whether, I don't know if you want to call it they live in a city or whatever it is, but it's just out there on the water, as you're mentioning, like, you know, with the boats and it's a whole different construct. So I think this economy that is based on land and, you know, understanding of how we densify to deliver services to our population in ways that now we can, you know, has evolved. In Rwanda right now, like there's an online platform that provides government services. Like if I need my marriage certificate, I just go on my phone, go on a website, fill in my ID, and you know the information comes out, and then I click yes, and then send a payment, comes to my mobile phone, I pay, then 5 hours, they give notification to me that I can download my marriage certificate with a barcode that is verifiable anywhere. 10 years ago...
You're a victim of your Black Mirror.
10 years ago, I would have to go to a physical office where I would have to sit down and fill paperwork and everything else. So as these solutions of service delivery change, like how is our built environment going to also like evolve and accommodate for that? That's, you know, calls into questions of, you know, how we organize our urban centers, or that is the commercial pole, that is the administrative axis or pole or whatever it is. That's where embassies go. That's where whatever. Like how does that affect how we understand, you know, organizations of our lives? In life, it's an interesting subject that I don't know answers to. I'm not an urban designer. I'm an architect, but still, like, I find it fascinating.
No, you're an urban designer.
Why did
you are. Come on.
But,
no.
I'm really curious when you just said this, Christopher, because why do you? I think what is really the point of this is that you are both an urban designer. You're also a landscape architect, but you're also a builder or an architect. Yeah. And I think also when you look at some of these projects Peter presented. And the question about the rural or the urban, I think the notion of, you can say, the landscape and landscape architecture and nature, biodiversity, and the balance between urban and landscape is something, when you look at the projects, which is really good, there's always an integration of both. Yeah. And I think that is really, I wish all of us, we would be really well crafted as landscape architects, as building architects or designers, that I think looking into the future, we really need to be able to operate with those disciplines at the same time, all the time, through the whole process.
No,
otherwise we don't succeed in doing.
I agree entirely. I actually am extremely suspicious, as many of them in the room know, of these sort of categories that we have. Because actually the category sort of predefines where you start from, and it's usually wrong, quite frankly, in my estimation. So, you know, I have a real problem with this line of discussion, in a sense. I just don't think, you know, that all of a sudden we're dealing with sort of rural circumstances in Africa as being somehow different from dealing with floating populations in China has anything to do with much of anything, to be honest. We have to deal with them. They're issues, they're problems, they have problematics that are definable. And we have to have solutions for them. And we do in many cases. I mean, these two gentlemen here are very, very good at that. Me, I just talk a lot.
Help us organize our thoughts. I agree with what you're saying. The challenge becomes when we need efficiency, and I agree with you. Maybe sometimes where we start and where we stop from, when we categorize ourselves, like, is problematic. But I don't think at least in my experience, that is hasn't been the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue was disagreement about the problems we are trying to solve. So that, you know, as we would do something out of our thinking as architects, quote unquote, and then we hand over to engineers. And then engineers come in with, this is not possible. We never discussed the problem we're trying to solve in the first place. They're like, no, we can't do this. It's not designable structurally. And that disconnect, for me, that's where I find problematic in defining the problem we're trying to solve. And then, of course, I will not claim that I have the expertise of an urban designer that has spent enough time trying to understand these issues at that scale. The same way I will, as an architect, now start talking about the buildings. I think that's where I was coming from it. But I think the idea that we'll be solving problems contained within those narrow bandwidth of expertise that just leaves a lot fall through the crack that doesn't get addressed is where I think communities where I come from, we start suffering a lot. Because
absolutely.
Yes, I mean, those systems are not filled, and therefore, like, this thing just get swept under the rug, and then 20 years down the road, you just find, like, issues that manifest themselves now physically, because water cannot drain, because someone just, you know, at some point, like, never really addressed that issue at that scale. Either big or small or somewhere in the medium, like, water just doesn't drain, and it's there.
Yeah, but But again, I think categories create experiences that are narrower and narrower, and therefore they create the problem to begin with. It seems to me. I mean, that's what I took from your talk, as a matter of fact, was that we have to, as it were, see across as much territory as we possibly can, and then some. In other words, go to Zanzibar, across the water, in the case of East Africa. Yeah. I mean, that's got to do with the sort of style of design thinking. You know, design's actually about, you know, as Herbert Simon put it, it's about the way the world should be. It's not about the way the world is, i.e. not the categories that exist. It's the way it's supposed to be, should be, you know, and from a moralistic, aesthetic and other sorts of vantage points. That's what we're on about in this school, I would have thought. If we aren't, then we ought to be that way.
So thank you. Just to be mindful of time, we will wrap up this session for now. But I think we all are taking away a lot from this discussion here on how we define what the success of any urban design project is, and in questioning whether the project is successful and how it functions, who it includes, or perhaps how it endures and sustains. So thank you so much for joining us for the first half of the workshops today. We will take a 20-minute break now, and we will resume at 2:45 for workshop B. We will have 3 more panels, and we hope that you all will be able to join us again. Thank you so much.